My son disappeared for 2 weeks. When I went to his house, something was moving under the bed, and that moment changed my life forever. For days, I had been living with a storm inside me. The silence of my son's phone felt like a knife twisting deeper every night. He always called me, even if it was just for a short hello or to tell me how my grandson was doing. But this time, 2 weeks passed, and not even a single word came from him. At first, I told myself he was busy, maybe traveling for work. Maybe his phone had no signal. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. One morning, I couldn't bear it anymore. I packed a small bag, grabbed my shawl, and took the first bus heading toward the city where he lived. It was a 3-hour ride, but it felt like 3 years. I sat by the window, clutching the ticket in my trembling hands, my eyes staring outside, but not seeing anything. My heart was heavy, every beat echoing with fear. Please let him be fine, I whispered to myself, but the knot in my chest only grew tighter. When I arrived at the bus station, it was already getting dark. The cold air bit into my skin as I hurried toward the gated community where my son's house was. I had walked down that path many times before, visiting him and my sweet grandson, but this time my feet felt like they were carrying stones. I reached the familiar wooden door and knocked softly at first, then louder, my voice trembling. "Ethan? Liam?" But the silence of the night answered me back. I tried the door handle, not expecting it to open, but to my horror, it creaked slowly. The house was unlocked. My son never left his door open. Never. Especially with his little boy inside. My heart raced, and I stepped in carefully, holding my breath as if one wrong sound would break the fragile silence forever. The living room stopped me in my tracks. Everything was a mess. The sofa was pushed sideways, as if someone had shoved it in anger. A coffee mug lay shattered on the floor, porcelain pieces scattered like broken teeth, stained with dried coffee. My legs trembled as I stepped over the shards, afraid the crunch of glass would shatter the unbearable quiet. The air smelled damp and heavy, and the house felt abandoned, almost haunted. I moved toward the kitchen. A large water jug was toppled over, empty bottles rolling on the floor as if someone had drunk from them desperately. I shivered, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just a messy house. Something bad had happened here. Slowly, I climbed the stairs, gripping the railing for support. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. First, I opened Ethan's office, empty. Papers scattered on the desk, chair pushed aside, but no sign of him. His bedroom was the same, bed neatly made, but cold, lifeless, untouched. Finally, I reached Liam's room. My voice broke as I called, "Liam? Sweetheart, are you here?" No answer. I stepped inside, staring at his toys neatly stacked in one corner. His Lego blocks, his teddy bear, all there, waiting for the boy who should have been laughing and playing. My chest ached as if someone had cut me open. Then it happened. A faint scraping sound. It came from under the bed. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It was like the sound of a bottle rolling slowly against the wooden floor. My blood turned cold. I wanted to bend down and look, but my legs refused to move. My fingers dug into the desk nearby just to keep myself from falling. "Liam," I whispered again, my voice trembling. No reply, just that faint, haunting sound as if warning me to run. Panic surged through me. My body finally moved on its own. I ran out of the house, my hands shaking so badly I struggled to dial the police. Once, twice, I pressed the wrong buttons. Finally, the call went through. My son is missing. I haven't heard from him in 2 weeks. I screamed, my voice breaking. "And there's something under my grandson's bed," I stammered, not even knowing if my words made sense. I just knew I needed help, fast. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights filled the quiet street. 2 officers followed me inside. My fingers shook as I pointed to the bed. "There, under there," I whispered, my throat dry. One officer knelt, his voice steady. "Is anyone under there?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, in one swift motion, they lifted the mattress. My heart stopped. There he was, my little Liam, curled up, thin and pale, his hair matted with sweat, his tiny body trembling. He clutched an empty water bottle, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. His wide eyes stared blankly, not at me, not at anyone, but into some distant place I couldn't reach. I dropped to my knees, tears blurring my vision. "Liam, my boy," I whispered, my hands trembling so much I couldn't touch him. He didn't respond. He just clung to that bottle, his face lifeless, his soul locked somewhere deep inside. In that moment, I knew this nightmare was only just beginning. The moment I saw my grandson under that bed, my soul broke into pieces. His small hands gripped that empty bottle, as if it were his last lifeline, and his blank stare cut deeper into me than any knife ever could. I wanted to scream his name. I wanted to pull him into my arms and never let go, but my hands shook too much. I was terrified that if I touched him, he might slip away like fragile glass shattering in my embrace. The officers exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale. One of them whispered, "Ma'am, we need to get him to the hospital immediately." His voice trembled, even though he tried to sound calm. I nodded quickly, wiping the tears that kept falling down my cheeks. My lips could barely form words, but I managed to whisper, "Please, please save him." The taller officer gently reached under the bed and lifted Liam into his arms. My heart nearly stopped when I saw how light he looked in that man's hold, as if he were just a shadow of the lively boy who once filled my days with laughter. His clothes were filthy, stained. His hair clung to his forehead from sweat, and yet his face carried no expression, no fear, no joy, no anger. Just emptiness. I followed them like a ghost as they carried him out to the patrol car. My legs stumbled, but I didn't care. I couldn't lose sight of him. The car doors opened, and they placed him gently on the back seat. I climbed in beside him, clutching his hand, which felt cold as stone. The siren roared, lights flashing against the dark streets, but all I could hear was the sound of Liam's shallow breathing. I held a piece of paper I had grabbed from his room and fanned him, whispering softly, "Grandma's here, sweetheart. I'm right here." But his eyes just stared straight ahead, unblinking, lost in a place beyond my reach. I looked at the officer driving and begged, "Please, hurry." My voice cracked and tears blurred the red and blue lights outside. At the hospital, doctors rushed forward the moment we arrived. "Severe dehydration," one nurse shouted. Another shouted back, "We need IVs immediately." They placed Liam on a stretcher and wheeled him inside, their voices blending with the beeping machines. I ran behind them until they pushed me back at the glass door of the emergency room. "You have to wait here," a nurse told me. My hands pressed against the cold glass, my heart beating so loud, I thought the whole hospital could hear it. I watched helplessly as they worked on him. Tubes, needles, hurried hands. Every movement pierced me with fear. My knees grew weak, and I slid into a chair in the hallway. I buried my face into my hands and whispered, "Ethan, where are you? Where's my son? What happened to you? What happened to Liam?" The silence answered me again, the same silence that had been haunting me for 2 weeks. Minutes felt like hours. Every time a doctor passed by, my heart jumped, hoping for news. Finally, a woman in her 40s, her kind eyes shadowed by exhaustion, stepped out. "He's stable for now," she said gently, "but he's malnourished, severely dehydrated, and in shock. He's not speaking." Her words crushed me. "Shock," I repeated, my lips trembling. She nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Something very traumatic happened to him. It will take time. Be patient with him. He needs love, care, and time." I wanted to thank her, but the words wouldn't come out. I only nodded as tears rolled down my face. When they finally let me in, Liam was lying on a bed, so big his small body looked like it could disappear into the sheets. A thin tube ran into his arm, a bag of clear fluid hanging above. His eyes were open, but still distant, staring at nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed, taking his tiny cold hand in mine. "Liam, sweetheart, it's Grandma. I'm here." My voice cracked as I leaned closer. "You're safe now." But he didn't blink, didn't move, didn't even breathe faster at the sound of my voice. I began to hum softly, the same lullaby I used to sing to Ethan when he was a child. My voice shook, but I kept going. "Hush now, little one." My tears wet the back of Liam's hand as I sang. Behind me, I heard footsteps. A young police officer entered, notebook in hand. His serious eyes softened as he looked at Liam. He sat beside me and spoke quietly. Ma'am, when was the last time you heard from your son? I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. 2 weeks, 2 endless weeks. I called him, left messages, even wrote to Liam on his tablet. No reply. Ethan never did this before. He never vanished like this. The officer nodded, jotting notes quickly. We're treating this as a missing persons case. We'll need a full statement, but for now, stay with your grandson. He needs you. I pressed my lips together, my chest tightening. I looked at Liam again, his fingers twitching slightly as if trying to hold on to his teddy bear that wasn't there. My voice broke as I whispered, he needs his father too. That night, I sat by Liam's side without moving. Nurses came and went, checking his vitals, but I couldn't leave him. His small chest rose and fell so lightly I was terrified it would stop at any second. Sometimes he twitched, his lips parting as if to say something, but no sound came out. Other times, he gripped the water bottle they had taken from him, holding it tightly even in sleep, as though it was the last thing connecting him to life. Every time he shivered, I covered him with the blanket. Every time sweat dripped down his forehead, I wiped it gently with trembling hands. Grandma's here, I kept repeating, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. I won't leave you. Not ever. But inside, fear tore me apart. Where was Ethan? What had happened in that house? And what darkness had stolen the light from Liam's little eyes? That night in the hospital, I didn't move from my grandson's side. I couldn't. His little hand lay in mine, thin and weak, his veins visible under pale skin. I kept stroking his knuckles, hoping for even the slightest squeeze back, but nothing came. His eyes were half open, staring somewhere far away, like he had locked himself in a world only he could see. The machines beeped softly around us, but it was his silence that cut the deepest. Silence from a boy who once filled every room with laughter, who used to run into my arms shouting, "Grandma, look what I made." Now there was only stillness, broken only by the shallow rhythm of his breathing. I leaned closer, whispering into his ear, "Liam, sweetheart, it's me. Grandma's here. You're not alone. I promise you're safe now." My words trembled, my throat burning from the tears I kept swallowing. But still no response. Hours passed. Nurses came in to check on him, adjusting the wiping his forehead, whispering updates to each other, but I didn't move from my chair. I sat like a statue, afraid that if I let go of his hand for even a moment, he would vanish from me just like his father had. Around midnight, Liam suddenly twitched. His body jolted upright, his eyes wide open in terror. His lips parted as if he wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My heart jumped. I wrapped my arms around him quickly, rocking him gently. "Shoo, it's okay. Grandma's got you. No one will hurt you. You're safe." But he shook in my arms like a frightened bird, clutching that teddy bear the nurse had given him earlier. He pressed it so tightly against his chest that his knuckles turned white. His mouth opened again, but only a faint gasp came out, followed by trembling sobs that broke my soul. I rocked him, humming the lullaby again, my tears soaking his hair. Slowly, his small body relaxed, but his eyes never closed. He was awake, trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't let him go. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the hospital window. I had barely blinked all night, but I didn't care. I dipped a cloth in warm water and gently wiped Liam's face. His skin was clammy, his lips dry and cracked. I whispered softly, "There we go, my boy. You'll feel better soon." He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to hope he heard me. I took a spoon of broth the nurse had brought and touched it to his lips. "Come on, Liam, just a little." He opened his mouth slowly, swallowing once, then turned his face away. My heart broke. "Please, sweetheart, eat a little more," I begged, my voice cracking. But he pressed his lips tightly, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. That was when a young woman entered. She wore a simple blouse, her hair tied back neatly, her eyes calm but warm. She crouched beside the bed, smiling gently. "Hi, Liam, my name is Anna. I'm here to help you, okay? You don't have to be scared." She looked at me and nodded softly, as if telling me she understood my fear. Then she sat near him, not too close, and spoke in a voice as gentle as the morning breeze. Liam, do you want to tell me anything? Maybe about your dad? Or about something you saw? For a moment, his fingers twitched around the teddy bear. My breath caught. Maybe, just maybe, he would say something. But then his little arms tightened around the bear. His gaze dropped to the sheets, and not a single word escaped his lips. I felt my throat close. Will he ever talk again? I whispered to the woman, almost pleading. She touched my shoulder softly. Ma'am, he went through something very big. The shock is too heavy for a child. But give him time. Be patient. He will speak again when he's ready. Patience. That word felt cruel in that moment. How could I wait when my son was still missing? How could I be calm when Liam was locked in this silent suffering? Every day that passed felt like another weight crushing my chest. 2 days slipped by in that hospital room. I didn't leave his side, not even to sleep. My back ached from the chair. My eyes burned from the tears, but none of that mattered. All that mattered was Liam. Sometimes he would jolt awake from nightmares, his small mouth open in a silent scream, his chest heaving. I would grab him quickly, cradling him against me. It's okay, my boy. Grandma's here. No one can hurt you now. I would wipe the sweat from his brow, my hand trembling so much the cloth would almost slip. Other times, I tried to talk to him about happy memories. Remember the summer we planted flowers in my yard? You helped me dig the holes, and then you ran around with that little watering can. I forced a smile, hoping to spark something in him, but his only response was to clutch the teddy bear tighter. On the third morning, I tried again. I wiped his face gently, kissed his forehead, and began telling him a funny story from when his father was young. Your dad once broke one of my vases and thought he could fix it by taping the pieces back together. Can you imagine? I chuckled through tears. For a brief moment, Liam's small fingers squeezed the teddy bear tighter, as if something inside him stirred. My heart leapt. I was about to continue when my phone vibrated inside my purse. The screen showed the police precinct's number. My stomach twisted, a cold chill crawling up my spine. I answered with a shaking hand. The detective's voice was heavy, darker than before. Mrs. Grace, you need to prepare yourself. We just re-examined your son's house with luminol. We found a very large amount of blood in the living room. My body went numb. The cloth slipped from my hand onto the floor. My voice cracked as I repeated, blood. He hesitated, then continued, each word slicing me open. It's very likely we're dealing with a homicide. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, and I clutched the side of the bed to keep myself from collapsing. That was when Liam suddenly tugged at my sleeve. His eyes, red with tears, stared up at me. And then, after days of silence, his small voice broke through the air like glass shattering. Dad, he's dead, he sobbed, his cries shaking the entire room. When Liam's small voice finally broke the silence, my entire world collapsed. His words were weak, almost a whisper, but filled with a pain so raw it sliced through me like a blade. Daddy's dead. The sound of it echoed in my head again and again. My knees buckled, and I fell back into the chair, pulling him into my arms with all the strength I had left. Tears streamed down my face, soaking his hair. No, no, sweetheart, I whispered frantically, my voice cracking. It's not true. Don't say that. Your dad is fine. He has to be fine. But even as I said those words, I didn't believe them myself. The room filled with the sound of his sobs, loud, broken, heartbreaking. Nurses rushed in, their faces alarmed, but I clutched him tighter, refusing to let go. Please, I begged them, my voice raw. Don't take him from me. He finally spoke. One of the doctors, a gentle-looking woman with tired eyes, knelt beside me and touched my arm softly. Mrs. Grace, let us help him. We'll calm him down. He's too fragile. I shook my head wildly. No, I have to be here. I can't leave him, not now. He needs me. The doctor nodded, understanding, and stepped back. A nurse quickly prepared a mild sedative, whispering, this will help him rest. They gave it to him gently, and slowly his sobs quieted. His body grew limp in my arms, his eyes still wet with tears, his lashes sticking together. He looked at me one last time, his lips trembling as if he wanted to say more. Then he closed his eyes. I kissed his forehead, whispering through my tears, "Grandma's here, my love. I'll never leave you. Never." Not long after, the door opened again, and the detective entered with another officer. His face was grave, his notebook already in his hand. He lowered his voice out of respect, but his words carried a heavy weight. "Mrs. Grace, we need to take an initial statement. Can you tell us what you know about the last time you spoke with your son?" I wiped my tears, my throat dry, but I forced myself to speak. "It's been 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence. I called every day. I left messages, texts. I even wrote to Liam on his tablet. Nothing. Ethan never ignored me like that. He always checked in. Always." The detective scribbled quickly, nodding. His partner leaned against the wall, listening intently. "And in those 2 weeks, did anyone mention seeing him? Any neighbors, co-workers, friends?" I shook my head, my chest tightening. I called his colleagues. They thought he was on vacation. His friends hadn't heard from him either. No one knew anything. And his neighbors, one of them told me she saw a light switch on and off during the storm, but that was it. Since then, nothing. The detective's jaw clenched, and he closed the notebook slowly. "We'll do everything we can." This case just became more serious. When he left, the room fell silent again. I turned back to Liam, brushing his damp hair away from his forehead. He lay so still, breathing softly, his small hand still clutching that teddy bear. That night was endless. I sat in the dim light, listening to his shallow breaths. Every time he shifted, my heart skipped. Every time he whimpered in his sleep, I leaned closer, whispering soothing words he probably couldn't hear. At one point, his lips moved faintly, calling out, "Dad," and my tears flowed again. In those quiet hours, my mind wandered back to the last time I spoke with Ethan. His voice had sounded tired, weary, but he still laughed to ease my worry. "Mom, I'm fine. Work's just a little heavy." I had believed him. I hadn't pressed further. Now I cursed myself for not asking more, for not hearing the hidden weight in his tone. If only I had pushed harder, maybe things would be different. By the second day, my exhaustion was overwhelming, but I still refused to leave the hospital. Nurses urged me to rest, but how could I close my eyes when my grandson was lying there, silent and broken? Every moment felt too precious, every second too fragile. I tried feeding him again. "Just a little, Liam," I whispered, lifting the spoon of broth, "so you can get strong and come home with Grandma." He swallowed a tiny bit, then shook his head, turning away. My heart ached, but I kissed his forehead softly. "That's okay. We'll try again later." Later that night, his body jolted again, and he sat up suddenly, sweat dripping down his face, his mouth opening in silent terror. His arms clutched me tightly, trembling. I held him, rocking him back and forth. "It's okay, my boy. It's just a dream. Grandma's here. No one can hurt you now." But in his eyes, I saw something worse than fear. I saw memories he couldn't escape, memories I wasn't ready to hear. The psychologist returned the next morning. She sat by the bed, speaking in her calm, soothing voice. "Liam, do you want to tell me what happened that night? Anything at all?" He hugged his teddy bear tighter, his lips pressed together. His eyes didn't move from the floor. I leaned toward the psychologist, my voice breaking. "Will he ever talk? Will he tell us what he saw?" She sighed gently, her hand warm on my shoulder. "He will, but not now. Not until he feels safe. The shock is too big for such a young child. Give him time, Mrs. Grace. He's holding everything inside because it's too heavy to let out." Time. That word stabbed me again. Time was running out. My son was still missing, and the blood the police had found in his living room. I clenched Liam's hand and whispered to myself, "Ethan, what happened to you? Where are you? Please, please come back to us." But in the pit of my heart, I already feared the truth. The detective's call still echoed in my ears long after the line went dead. Blood. That one word had drained every drop of warmth from my body. I sat frozen, staring at the wall, my fingers clutching the edge of Liam's blanket as though it was the only thing keeping me upright. I looked down at him, his small body curled against the sheets. He was half asleep from the sedative, his lashes damp with tears, his little hand still gripping that teddy bear. My heart clenched at the sight. How could I tell him? How could I let him carry more pain when he had already endured too much? But I didn't have to. Somehow he had already heard. His sudden cry earlier, his trembling voice saying, "Dad, he's dead." Those words haunted me. They weren't just the fears of a child. They were memories. He had seen something. That thought gnawed at me all night. I barely moved from the chair. Every time Liam shifted, I leaned closer, whispering, "It's okay, my boy. Grandma's here. You're safe." But inside, I was falling apart. By morning, the detective arrived in person. His tall frame filled the doorway, his serious expression softened only by the look of pity in his eyes. He carried a recorder in one hand, his notebook in the other. "Mrs. Grace, I know this is difficult, but we need to hear from Liam. Even a small detail could help us." I hesitated, my chest tightening. "He's fragile. He barely spoke last night, and when he did, it broke him." The detective crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "I understand. But sometimes children remember things adults can't imagine. If he can tell us anything, it could be the difference between finding Ethan or not." I swallowed hard and looked at Liam, who was awake now, his small fingers tracing the fur of his teddy bear absent-mindedly. I stroked his hair gently. "Liam, sweetheart, the police just want to help. They want to help find your daddy. Do you think you can tell us anything about that night?" His shoulders tensed immediately. He pressed his face into the bear, shaking his head. My heart twisted, but I kissed his temple and whispered, "It's okay. You don't have to be scared. Grandma's right here. No one will hurt you." The detective set the recorder on the bedside table, his voice calm. "Liam, you're very brave. Can you tell us what you remember? Just start wherever you can." For a long time, silence filled the room. My breath caught in my throat. I was afraid he wouldn't speak at all. Then, in the smallest, trembling voice, he whispered, "It was raining really hard." I froze. My fingers tightened around his hand, but I didn't interrupt. "I was playing with my Legos," he continued, his voice barely audible. "I was building a tower. Daddy said it was the best tower he'd ever seen." His lips quivered as he spoke, and tears slid down his cheeks. Then the doorbell rang. Many times. The detective leaned forward slightly, his pen still. "And what happened then, Liam?" Liam hugged the bear tighter, his voice breaking. "Daddy went to the door. He looked through the peephole, and his face, it was scared. I never saw him look like that before." I felt my chest ache. Ethan, my calm, steady boy, scared? I couldn't imagine it. "Then what?" the detective asked gently. Liam's voice dropped lower. Daddy turned to me. He ran over, knelt down, and whispered, "Liam, hide under the bed. Don't come out until I call you." He pushed me toward my room and pulled the blanket down so no one could see me. His little body trembled as he spoke. My tears blurred my vision. My grandson, only 8 years old, hiding under his bed while the storm raged outside. My heart broke in ways I didn't think possible. Through shaky breaths, Liam continued. I saw through the blanket. The door opened. A tall man came in. "And my mom." His voice cracked, the last word heavy with both love and fear. My stomach dropped. His mother? Ethan's ex-wife, Rachel. I felt the blood drain from my face. The detective's pen paused midair, his eyes sharp. "Your mom?" he asked carefully. Liam nodded, his tears falling fast now. She looked around the house and asked, "Where is Liam?" Daddy said I was with Grandma, that I went there for winter break. But I was right there under the bed. I pressed my hand over my mouth to hold back a sob. "Then they started yelling," Liam whispered. "Mom said something about money and debt. Daddy said he wouldn't give her anything, that she had already ruined too much." The detective exchanged a glance with his partner, his jaw tightening. And then, Liam's tiny shoulders shook violently. His voice dropped to a broken whisper. The tall man pushed Daddy. He fell. He hit his head on the table. There was blood. At that moment, Liam broke down completely, burying his face in my chest, sobbing so hard his little body shook. I wrapped my arms around him tightly, rocking him as tears poured down my own cheeks. "Sha, my boy, Sha, you're safe now. You did so well. Grandma's proud of you." The detective slowly turned off the recorder. His expression was grim as he stood. This is crucial. We'll use it as evidence. But Mrs. Grace, I'm afraid this confirms our fears. We're treating this as a homicide. My heart shattered at his words, even though I had already suspected it. Ethan was gone. My son, my pride, my boy gone. But as I held Liam, feeling his tiny heart beating wildly against mine, I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't break. I had to stay strong, for him, for Ethan, for the truth. That night, after Liam finally cried himself to sleep, I sat alone in the hospital room, staring at his fragile body curled up under the thin blanket. His little hand still clutched the teddy bear tightly, as though letting go would mean falling into the dark void of his memories. I brushed a strand of hair off his forehead, whispering, "You're safe now, my love. I won't let anyone hurt you again." But inside, I was trembling. His words replayed in my head again and again. My mom came in a tall man pushed daddy blood. Each detail was like a dagger twisting deeper. Rachel, the woman I once welcomed into my home like a daughter, the woman who had given birth to my grandson, had now become the shadow in our nightmare. The detective called me early the next morning. His voice was grave but steady. "Mrs. Grace, we need you at the station. We've rechecked Ethan's house, and the evidence matches what Liam said. There's more we need to show you." I hesitated, looking at Liam, who was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. I bent down and kissed his forehead. "Grandma will be right back, sweetheart. Be good for the nurse." My voice broke, but I forced myself to leave. At the station, the detective spread a map across the table in the briefing room. Red dots marked various points around Ethan's neighborhood. "We pulled surveillance from nearby cameras," he said, sliding a grainy video still toward me. I leaned in, my hands trembling. The image was blurry, but my heart stopped. A dark pickup truck parked outside Ethan's house the night of the storm. In the back, something long lay under a tarp. My stomach twisted. "Is that?" I couldn't finish the sentence. The detective nodded grimly. "We believe it was used to transport a body. It left Ethan Street shortly after the time Liam described. We tracked it on traffic cameras for a few miles, then lost it near the outskirts." I pressed a hand over my mouth, nausea rising. "And Rachel? Where is she?" Another officer spoke, flipping through his notes. Her apartment manager confirmed she moved out about 2 weeks ago. Packed in a hurry, took a large suitcase, paid cash, disappeared. The room spun around me. My legs felt weak, but I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. "So she ran right when Ethan disappeared," I whispered. The detective's jaw tightened. "Exactly. And according to a source, she had been drowning in debt. Loan sharks. Large amounts of money. Suddenly, she promised her creditors she'd pay everything back in 2 weeks." I froze. My heart pounded, so loudly I thought they could hear it. 2 weeks. That was the same time Ethan vanished. The detective leaned closer. "Do you know if Ethan ever had life insurance?" My breath caught. A memory flashed like lightning in my mind. Ethan in his 20s, beaming as he showed me a document. "Mom, I just bought life insurance. If anything ever happens, Rachel and Liam will be taken care of." Back then, it had felt like such a thoughtful, responsible thing. I never imagined it would one day become a weapon. I whispered, my voice shaking. Yes, he had a policy. Rachel was the beneficiary. The detective slammed his fist lightly against the table, his expression dark. "That's the motive. If Ethan died, she'd get everything. Enough to pay her debts and more." I sank into the chair, my face in my hands. Tears slid through my fingers as I whispered, "Why, Ethan? Why didn't you change it after the divorce? Why did you leave her name?" The detective placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. Or him. People don't expect the ones they once loved to turn into monsters." I nodded weakly, but my heart felt like it was being crushed. Rachel's face appeared in my mind, not the cruel woman she had become, but the smiling young girl who once blushed when I taught her how to cook, who held Ethan's hand like he was her world. Where did that woman go? How did she turn into this? Later that afternoon, the police invited me back to Ethan's house. I didn't want to go, but something inside told me I had to face it. The yellow tape still hung across the doorway, swaying slightly in the wind. The moment I stepped inside, my knees almost buckled. The living room looked exactly as I had left it. Shattered cup, overturned furniture, the dried coffee stain on the floor. Only now it wasn't just a mess. It was a crime scene. I stood frozen, staring at that stain, remembering Liam's trembling voice. Dad fell, there was blood. As I stood there, an elderly neighbor shuffled over, leaning on her cane. Mrs. Rose. Her eyes darted nervously as she whispered, "Grace, I shouldn't say this, but that night I heard shouting. Loud. Furniture being thrown. I wanted to call the police, but I was scared. I didn't want trouble." My throat tightened. I took her wrinkled hand gently. "Thank you for telling me. Please, you have to share this with the police. It might help." She nodded slowly, guilt clouding her eyes, then shuffled away. The detective joined me, his voice low. "We'll find that truck, and we'll find her. I promise." I wanted to believe him. But as I stood in that house, once filled with laughter, now heavy with silence, I felt a storm rising inside me. I couldn't escape the thought that Rachel wasn't just running. She was hunting for money, for escape, and she might not care how many lives she destroyed along the way. I walked out of that house into the bright afternoon sun, but all I felt was darkness. Days blurred together in the hospital. The ticking of the clock on the wall became the only reminder that time hadn't stopped, even though for me it felt like it had. Liam hardly spoke after that night. He clung to his teddy bear, his gaze fixed on the window as if waiting for someone who would never come back. I sat by his side every hour, brushing his hair, humming old songs, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. One evening, as I adjusted his blanket, the phone in my purse vibrated. My stomach knotted immediately. It was the precinct. I stepped into the hallway to answer, my hands trembling. "Mrs. Grace," the detective's voice came, low and serious. "We found something." My heart skipped. "What is it?" "We located Rachel's last known residence," he said. "A rundown apartment building in the South District. She moved out about 2 weeks ago, in a hurry, with a large suitcase. The landlady says she looked nervous. She also mentioned Rachel paid everything in cash. It matches the timeline of your son's disappearance." I pressed my free hand against the wall to keep myself steady. "So she's running?" "Yes," he confirmed. "And we think she's running with a plan. She didn't vanish without a goal." Later that day, I went with the police to that apartment. The hallway smelled of dampness and cigarettes. The landlady, a heavy-set woman with a sharp tongue, waved her hand as if annoyed by all the fuss. "That Rachel," she muttered. Trouble followed her like a shadow. Men knocking at odd hours, fights, phone calls that made her scream. Then, all of a sudden, she packs up and leaves at night. Didn't even say goodbye. Just handed me the key and disappeared. I felt bile rise in my throat. Of course she ran. She always ran when things got hard. But this time, she had dragged Ethan into her storm. As we were about to leave, a man appeared at the end of the alley. He was rough-looking, with a scar running across his cheek, his leather jacket worn at the sleeves. His eyes darted nervously when he saw the officers. He approached the landlady first, speaking in a low, gravelly voice. "Is Rachel here? I need to see her." The detective stepped forward instantly. "Who are you?" The man hesitated, then finally spat out, "Name's Marco. She owes me money. Big money. Said she'd pay in 2 weeks. But now she's vanished." His bitter laugh echoed down the alley. Typical. My stomach turned cold. 2 weeks again. Always 2 weeks. The exact time since Ethan disappeared. The detective's jaw tightened as he questioned the man further, but I barely heard the words. My mind raced, piecing things together. Rachel had promised money she didn't have. Then suddenly she shows up at Ethan's house with a strange man by her side. A fight breaks out. Ethan falls. Blood. A truck carrying something long under a tarp. And now this loan sharks. A debt she couldn't repay. A chill ran through me as an old memory struck me like a lightning bolt. Years ago, when Ethan and Rachel were still married, Ethan had proudly told me about the life insurance he purchased. "Mom, I want to make sure Rachel and Liam are protected. If anything happens to me, they'll never have to worry." At the time, It had warmed my heart. Ethan was always responsible, always thinking ahead. But now that same policy had become the cruelest trap. I pressed my hands against my face, my voice shaking. Could Rachel have really planned this, to kill him for money? The detective must have noticed my pale face because he asked gently, "Mrs. Grace, are you all right?" I lower my hands, tears streaming down my cheeks. Years ago, Ethan bought life insurance. Rachel was the beneficiary. I don't think he ever changed it. The room fell silent. The detective exchanged a dark look with his partner. He didn't need to say anything. I already knew what it meant. That night, I returned to the hospital and sat beside Liam. The dim light from the hallway spilled into the room, illuminating his sleeping face. His lips moved faintly in his sleep, whispering for his father. I wiped his tears with trembling fingers, my own chest aching. "Your daddy loved you, Liam," I whispered, brushing his hair back. "And I promise you, Grandma will get justice for him. No matter how long it takes, I'll protect you." The following morning, the detective called again. His voice carried urgency this time. "Mrs. Grace, we may have found a location. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, used by the same gang Rachel owed money to. We're sending a team now. You should prepare yourself. We might find evidence." I sank into the chair, my shawl clenched tightly in my fists. My heart pounded like a war drum. Evidence. I knew what that meant. I knew what they might find in that cold, dark place. That night, when the call finally came, I nearly dropped the phone. The officer's voice was low, careful, almost pitying. "Mrs. Grace, we found a body in the warehouse. A man. We believe it's your son. We'll need you to come identify him." The world tilted around me. My knees gave way, and I collapsed onto the floor of the hospital hallway. My cry echoed through the walls, raw and broken, as nurses rushed toward me. My son. My Ethan. The man who had brought me flowers on my birthday, who had made me laugh when I felt too tired to smile, who had worked himself to the bone for his child. Now reduced to a body hidden in a warehouse. I pressed my hand to my chest, gasping for air. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But the darkness I had feared for weeks had finally swallowed us whole. The morning I was asked to identify Ethan's body felt unreal. The hospital walls seemed to close in on me, their sterile white glow suffocating instead of comforting. Liam slept fitfully, clutching his teddy bear as if his tiny heart knew what I was about to face. I kissed his forehead gently, whispering, "Grandma will be back soon. Sleep, my love. Don't wake up yet." The drive to the morgue was a blur. My hands twisted the fabric of my shawl so tightly that threads came loose. Every passing building outside the window felt like it belonged to another world. A world where mothers didn't have to bury their sons, where little boys didn't have to whisper about blood in the dark. But that world wasn't mine anymore. Mine was filled with silence, dread, and the crushing weight of truth. When we arrived, the detective walked beside me. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he explained the process. "We'll bring you inside. You'll see the body through a glass partition first. You don't have to go closer if you can't." I nodded numbly, my throat so tight I couldn't form words. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as they carried me down the cold hallway. The air grew colder with every step, the smell of disinfectant and something metallic filling my nose. Finally, we entered a room where a large window separated us from the space beyond. A man in a white coat stood by a covered gurney. He pulled the sheet back slowly, revealing the face beneath. My knees buckled instantly. The detective caught my arm, but I shook him off and pressed my trembling hands against the glass. It was Ethan, my beautiful boy, my son who once ran barefoot through the yard, who used to laugh so loudly the neighbors joked about it. His face was pale now, his lips colorless, his eyes closed forever. A bruise marred the side of his head, dark and violent against his skin. I collapsed to the floor, my cries tearing through the sterile silence. "No, no, my boy, my Ethan." My hands clawed at the cold tiles, as if I could dig a hole deep enough to hide from the truth. My chest burned, my heart screamed, every part of me breaking at once. The detective knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Grace. I wish this wasn't true." But it was true. Too true. I forced myself back up, leaning on the glass, staring at my son's still face. I whispered through the barrier, as if he could hear me. I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have protected you. I should have done more. You didn't deserve this. You deserved a long, happy life with your son. Oh God, I failed you. Memories crashed through me like waves. Ethan's first steps, his first day of school, his nervous smile when he brought Rachel home for the first time, the way he cradled Liam like he was the most precious thing in the world. Each memory cut deeper, reminding me of everything stolen from him, from us. The examiner spoke gently, but his words blurred. Blunt force trauma to the head matches the account given by the child. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to think of how he had suffered, of how his last moments were filled with betrayal and violence. The detective's voice pierced the fog. We'll take this to court, Mrs. Grace. Rachel will face justice. I promise you she won't escape. I turned to him, my eyes blazing with tears. Promise me she'll never touch Liam again. Promise me she won't come near him. His jaw tightened. I promise. They gave me a few moments alone. I pressed my forehead against the glass, whispering broken words only a mother could speak. Rest now, my boy. Rest knowing your mother loves you. I'll raise Liam for you. I'll protect him with everything I have. And I swear, Ethan, she won't win. Not this time. When I finally turned away, my legs barely carried me down the hall. The world outside seemed too bright, too alive for the grief I carried. The detective offered to drive me back, but I shook my head. I needed the silence, the suffocating quiet, to scream inside without witnesses. Back at the hospital, I slipped into Liam's room. He stirred, opening his tired eyes. Grandma, he whispered. I forced a smile, though my heart was shattered into pieces. I brushed his hair softly. I'm here, my love. Always. He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, Is Daddy really gone? My throat tightened, and I held him close. Yes, sweetheart. Daddy's gone to heaven. But he loved you so much, more than anything in this world. And Grandma loves you just as much. You're not alone. He buried his face in my chest, silent tears soaking my blouse. I rocked him slowly, my own tears falling onto his small shoulders. In that moment, I knew one thing with certainty. My son was gone, but his love lived on in Liam. And I would fight like hell to protect that little boy, no matter what it cost me. The days after Ethan's identification felt like moving through water. Every step heavy, every breath painful. Grief clung to me like a shadow that refused to let go. But I couldn't collapse, not completely. Liam needed me. His little hands reached for me in the night, his voice trembling whenever he whispered, Grandma, don't leave me. I never left. I sat by his bed, read him stories in a shaking voice, and brushed his hair until he drifted into restless sleep. He had lost his father. I couldn't let him lose his anchor too. The detective visited often. He carried folders, photographs, and maps, his eyes tired but determined. We're closing in on Rachel, he said one evening. We traced the pickup truck to a storage facility near the river. She rented a unit under a false name. My chest tightened. And, did you find her? He shook his head. Not yet. But she's desperate. People like her always make mistakes when they're running out of options. We just need to be patient. That word again, patient. I was so tired of patience. Every night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how Rachel could sleep knowing what she had done. I wondered if she even felt guilt, or if greed had completely swallowed whatever humanity she once had. One afternoon, while I sat feeding Liam spoonfuls of soup, the detective called. His voice carried urgency I hadn't heard before. Mrs. Grace, we have a lead. Rachel tried withdrawing cash at a small bank in the East District. She was caught on camera. We're sending officers now. My heart pounded as I looked at Liam. His wide eyes searched mine, sensing the shift in my expression. What is it, Grandma? I set the spoon down, my hands trembling. They've seen your mom. They might catch her. His lips quivered, confusion and fear flickering across his young face. Will she come here? I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. No, sweetheart. She won't hurt you. Not ever again. I promise. That night was endless. The phone sat on the bedside table, every vibration making my heart race. I held Liam close, humming softly, though my voice cracked with each note. Around midnight, the call finally came. "We've located her," the detective said. His voice was steady, but beneath it I sensed adrenaline. "She's holed up in a motel outside the city. We're moving in." I couldn't breathe. My chest rose and fell rapidly. "Will she resist?" There was a pause. "We're prepared for that." I sat awake the entire night, gripping Liam's small hand. He stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly, "Daddy." My tears spilled silently onto the pillow. "Hold on, Ethan. Justice is coming." The next morning, the detective returned, his expression grim but resolute. "She's in custody," he said simply. I froze, my breath catching. "Rachel?" He nodded. "We caught her trying to pack the last of her things. She had cash, a fake passport, and a bus ticket out of state. She was ready to vanish, but we stopped her." My knees gave way, and I sank into the chair. Relief flooded me, but so did rage. Rage that she had dared to plan her escape, while Ethan lay cold in a morgue, while Liam cried for his father in his sleep. The detective continued. "She's denying everything, of course. Claims she hasn't seen Ethan in weeks. But we found blood traces on her clothing. And with Liam's testimony, plus the evidence from the house, we have more than enough to charge her." I pressed my hands together tightly, my knuckles white. "Promise me she'll never be free again. Promise me she'll pay for what she's done." The detective met my eyes. "I promise. This won't go unpunished." That afternoon, I went back to the hospital and sat by Liam's side. He looked up at me with questioning eyes. "Grandma, did they find her?" I nodded slowly, brushing his cheek with trembling fingers. "Yes, sweetheart. They did." He hugged his teddy bear tighter, his lips pressing together. "Will she come here?" I shook my head firmly, pulling him into my arms. "No, my love. She can't hurt us anymore. She won't ever take you from me. You're safe." For the first time in weeks, Liam's shoulders relaxed slightly. He leaned into me, his little hand clutching mine. And in that fragile moment, I realized something. We had survived the storm. We were battered, broken, scarred, but still standing. Yet as I rocked him gently, my eyes staring into the dim glow of the hospital room, I knew our journey wasn't over. The court battles, the hearings, the painful retelling of every detail, it was all waiting for us. But so was justice, and I would see it through. For Ethan, for Liam, for the truth. The trial began months later, but for me, it felt like only days had passed since Ethan's smile faded forever. Every night, I still woke to the sound of Liam crying in his sleep, whispering for his father. Every morning, I forced myself to rise, to dress, to sit in the courtroom as the truth was peeled open like an old wound that refused to heal. Rachel entered on the first day in handcuffs. Her once glamorous face looked hollow, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. This wasn't the young woman who had once held Ethan's hand shyly at our dinner table. This was someone else, cold, desperate, eaten alive by greed. She spotted me in the gallery, her gaze hardening. For a second, she almost smirked, but I didn't flinch. I held Liam's small hand tightly, my thumb stroking his skin as I whispered, "We're stronger than her. She won't win." The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece. Liam's recorded statement, the blood in Ethan's living room, the surveillance footage of the pickup truck, the traces found on Rachel's clothes, and, finally, the revelation of the life insurance policy. Each word cut me deeper, but also built a wall of truth so solid even Rachel's lies couldn't break it. When Liam's turn came to testify, my heart nearly broke. He stood in front of the court, his small frame trembling, clutching the teddy bear we had brought for him. His voice shook as he spoke of that night. The storm, the shouting, his father's last words telling him to hide, the sound of the crash, the blood. The room was silent, every ear bent toward his fragile voice. Rachel shifted uncomfortably, her mask cracking. For the first time, she looked nervous. I wanted to run to Liam, to scoop him into my arms, to shield him from the pain of reliving that night. But I stayed seated, my fists clenched, whispering prayers under my breath. "Be strong, my boy. Just a little longer." When the closing arguments ended, the jury deliberated. Hours passed like days. Liam rested his head on my lap as we waited, his breathing soft, his little hand gripping mine. I stroked his hair, whispering, "Daddy is proud of you." So proud. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood, his voice clear and steady. "We find the defendant, Rachel Carter, guilty of first-degree murder." The room erupted. Some gasped, some whispered, but I only sat frozen, tears spilling silently down my cheeks. The judge's gavel struck, the sentence read aloud. Life in prison without parole. Rachel screamed, her voice raw, but her words blurred into nothing. She was dragged out, fighting against the inevitable. But to me, it was as though she had already disappeared into the shadows forever. I bent over and kissed the top of Liam's head, whispering, "It's over, my love. It's finally over." The days after the trial were quieter, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't heavy with dread. It was filled with the fragile hope of healing. Liam slowly began to smile again. His laughter returned in small bursts, soft at first, then louder, brighter. He still carried scars, but he also carried resilience. One afternoon, months later, we sat in the garden outside my home. The sun warmed our faces, and Liam played with a small toy car on the patio. He looked up at me suddenly, his eyes clearer than they had been in months. "Grandma," he said, "do you think Daddy can see me?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. He sees you every day. And he's smiling because you're so brave." He smiled faintly, then leaned against me. "I miss him." "I do too," I whispered, wrapping an arm around him. "But we carry him here in our hearts. As long as we live, he lives too." That night, after putting him to bed, I sat by the window alone, the stars twinkling in the dark sky. My heart still ached, but it also held something new, strength. A strength I never knew I had until life forced me to find it. I realized then that grief doesn't end. It changes. It becomes part of you, shaping who you are, guiding how you live. And though Ethan's life was stolen by greed, his love lived on through Liam, through me, through every memory we held onto. The lesson was clear. Love outlasts everything, even betrayal, even death. Money fades, but the bonds we create, the laughter, the kindness, the sacrifices, those are eternal. Rachel lost everything in her chase for wealth, but Ethan's legacy lived on in his son's smile, in the warmth of a grandmother's embrace. And as I whispered a final prayer into the night sky, I promised my son once more, "Your boy is safe. I'll raise him with love, with truth, with strength. And we will not let your story end in tragedy. We will live, Ethan, for you,